The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government.
I'm back. Ralph Tyko, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I'm lucky enough to have my buddy and giant maven, Michael Duca, with me. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Ralph. As an author and a grammarian, I want to make it crystal clear to people that if I'm a maven, I'm a maven about the giants. I'm not a giant maven. I'm just 5'6".
All right. You're also a wordsmith. So it's like capital letters. There was a capital letters meme that I won't mention on Facebook that's very funny. It's funny how grammar and capitals, it changes everything.
Well, it does. Uppercase is now being used as capital punishment.
And all uppercase is screaming at someone. See, you have to learn when you come to the internet. You have to learn the little courtesies. I had no idea. Just at the beginning when I entered the internet world, I'd use uppercase to describe, just like it's an exclamation mark. But no, there's a way of communicating, and but I liked that.
Well, let's start with something interesting, Ralph. Let's start with a little tidbit that is relevant to this particular part of the discussion. Do you know why capital letters are called uppercase?
No.
It goes back to the days of hot typesetting for newspapers and books, linotypes. The letters, the slugs, were kept in a set of drawers. And because the capital letters were used much less frequently, they were kept in the highest drawers that were least easily acceptable, and so they were in the upper part of the case and became known as uppercase letters.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you.
And in fact, the correct name for, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I shouldn't say the correct name. I think the correct name for lowercase letters is minuscule. And I believe that the correct name for uppercase letters is majuscule.
Oh, okay. Wow. See, we learn something on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network every day, and at a much higher percentage of learning when I talk to you than when I talk to myself, certainly.
Well, tune in next week for a discussion on the difference between a virgule and an interrobang.
All right. Same time, same bat station. We were talking off the air a little bit, and this is the first 3 days that I could remember that I've spent glued to CNN as opposed to the Baseball Network or, ESPN. We got some stuff going on in this country that perhaps you can give us a baseball analogy in history of baseball. I just thought of this off the top of my head to what's going on today. If there's any way we can, because baseball survived a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm hoping this country survives one hell of a crisis that's going on.
In a short answer, as a U.S. diplomatic history major as well as an organizational psychology major, I will tell you, no, I have no baseball-based analogy for what's going on in this country. I don't even have a historical analogy for it. It's really fascinating. Coming as I do from a mixed European background, my dad was the first member of his family born in this country. They were from Italy. My mother was born in Germany at the start of World War I.
Really?
I'm a little bit more attenuated to European parallels, perhaps, than some people. And what I do find interesting is, and I am not making direct comparisons here, and I am not calling out people by name or by ideology. I'm simply saying that the inability for each side in our nation right now to acknowledge the other, even in its existence, is unique in history, I think. But what's not unique is, each side's supporters picking out and cherry picking things. When you listen to the president's supporters now, they talk about, unemployment's as low as it's ever been, and the economy is great, and yada yada yada. And there is a historical parallel.
But it isn't great for the middle class. It's great for the very rich, the people who are.
Okay, but you were asking for a historical parallel, so I'm trying to construct one for you. And there is a historical parallel for that kind of yes but response or knee-jerk response, and that is, yes, but they made the trains run on time, and yes, but they drained the swamps outside of Rome, and now we don't have the mosquito problem anymore. Even bad governments can accomplish some good things, and good governments can make some bad mistakes. It's all part of the imperfect experiment we call democracy. But governments should not have as their apparent goal, apparent, I say, and it's not necessarily true that it is, but it sure seems that the goal of the current government in the United States is to sow discord.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if the man didn't tweet and just had regular press conferences like every other president has done, he might be in better stead than he is now? Let's put it that way.
Well, probably, but
he's his own worst public relations man.
Well, he's his own worst public relations man with those who have determined by this point in his presidency to oppose him. But those who have determined to support him love the tweets. They use it as an example of not of someone who's unhinged or irrational, but as someone who's one of them, who thinks like they do and talks like they do, who doesn't dress things up. The president talks like your buddies at the bar on their third beer.
Yep. Yes, but those people at the bar don't have their finger on the button. And that's what's scary. I don't think Obama, I don't think Bush, I don't think any of them spoke like my buddies at the bar. I don't want a president that speaks like my buddies at the bar on the third beer.
Well, you don't want that, but a significant portion of America thought that with the bad that came with it, that the good that would come from an outsider, from quote unquote an experienced businessman, you hear all the time this rubric that if we just ran our government like a business, we'd be in much better shape because our money would go farther and our hard-earned tax dollars would be spent wiser and so on and so forth.
Notwithstanding all of that, there's the possible collusion with Russia, and I put that in quote, that could prove to be treasonous. Now, that doesn't seem to affect the hardcore supporters who support him more in the past 3 or 4 days than, if anything, than they did before. Now, can you explain that as a sociological phenom, let's say?
Oh, it's very easy to explain. Let me see if I can think of a good sports analogy for it. It's analogous to a city that is, craving some kind of a star for its downtrodden sports teams, and they, acquire at massive cost a free agent who doesn't quite work out. Doesn't work out at all, but they are still staggeringly loyal to that free agent through it all. I mean, it's not a good example of it, but you can kind of look at Giants fans' treatment of Hunter Pence. In this case, they are revering what he's done in the past and kind of forgiving what he's not doing currently. But, that's a situation where, and this is kind of typical of most sports contracts, is that the guys who get paid a lot are almost never worth it at the end of the contract. Mm-hmm. And yet we stick with them and we remain fiercely loyal to them. If you have gone out on a limb and elected as president a guy with 0 days of public service experience, not just 0 days of elected office, but 0 days of public service experience, never sat on a commission, never sat on a board, never did anything in public life, you're going to be pretty committed to him, because what does it say about you if he turns out to be completely not what you expected?
Well, it's not what it says about you. It's what it's, in quotes, it's what it says about the president.
Oh, I know that, and you know that, and in their hearts,
to be able to say, look,
that.
I was wrong. This guy is disappointing. He is disgracing. He's embarrassing. He went to Russia. He negotiated with Russia behind closed doors, with Putin behind closed doors, and he has the finger on the button. So I might have been wrong in supporting him, but I admit it. Now, how many people can say that? And the people as a whole, I'm generalizing, of course, but the people that would vote for a man like that are less apt to say, I was wrong, which is the Pete Rose disease. And if you want to take it to baseball, if Pete Rose would have said, yeah, I gambled, and I'm sorry, I'm a degenerate, I'm going to get some help, and boom, 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 he'd have been in the Hall of Fame. And America loves to forgive, but a president who in all of his days in office, the only thing he turned around, and the veterans had to practically threaten him, the American Legion, was to redesign his speech on McCain. And that's the only time he admitted that he was wrong in all of president. And I think that's a big human foible, and I think that's going to be his downfall.
Well, we'll see. I mean, one of the things that people forget when they look at the results of the 2016 election, the Democratic side is quick to bring up that he lost the popular vote, and Trump is quick to bring up that he got an electoral vote landslide, and what nobody is quick to bring up is that 63% of the public didn't vote.
Very good point.
And, whether you think it's good or whether you think it's bad, that's having an effect, or he's having an effect on that particular statistic. If you look at yesterday's election results, the turnout in the Democratic primary in Florida was nearly double what it was 4 years ago in the midterms.
Yeah, and we had some positive results where an African American took the Democratic nomination in Florida for the gubernatorial race, and that was
and whether that's positive results or negative results, the more important issue is democracy only works when the governed are engaged. And the one thing that we can point to through the entire primary cycle this year is that the governed are more engaged. The turnout for many, many states in the primaries has been close to the turnout in presidential election years. That's unprecedented, and it's very valuable.
And it tells me that change is coming, and impeachment or no, change will be coming.
Well, we can argue about that all you want. I mean, until people get into the sanctity of the booth and pull the lever or punch the card, and we count them up, we don't know. But because remember, although the outcome of the 2016 election was within the margin of error, which everyone likes to conveniently forget when they say, "Oh, polls are meaningless." Remember that we went into Election Day 2016 expecting an outcome and being told that that outcome was 90% likely. Well, every once in a while, the long shot wins.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that if Deborah Wasserman Schultz and the DNC hadn't screwed Bernie out of the nomination, things would be different? I think
No.
he would have won.
No, I don't. I don't think Bernie's electable. And I think that Bernie's existence and his continued influence on the Democratic Party is an indictment of the lack of leadership of that party, because if the guy you turn to for guidance is somebody who so disrespects your organization that he refuses to join it, there is simply no excuse for an independent to be the Democratic nominee. There's not one person in the party that they can find and rally behind who's actually a member.
Well, the person that they chose to rally behind was unelectable as well.
Perhaps.
Not perhaps.
But,
she didn't win.
Unless you count the 3 million more people who voted for her than against her. I don't think she was not.
One side will
unelectable.
argue.
I think that she was given very poor strategic advice, which is a different thing entirely from being unelectable.
Well,
had she campaigned,
she
campaigned in the Rust Belt, we may have had
let me change the word. I'll be a wordsmith. She was unelected, not unelectable.
Under our system, and the question that we now want to be asking, I think, is, does the Electoral College still make sense? The Electoral College was brought into being as a way of appeasing slaveholding states and ensuring that agrarian America would not be overrun by urban America. But that was at a time when there were an odd number of states, when there were 13 states, and when most of them were agrarian. Now we're in a situation where, if I'm not mistaken, the population of the 30 largest counties in the United States is more than 50% of the country's population. And if you design a system that disenfranchises people who live in the cities and who are in the cities because it's the only place that has economic opportunity, what are you saying? You're saying we want to give the most power to the people with the least success.
How is change initiated like that? How could the system be changed from the electoral to the popular? Does that go through the Supreme Court?
I believe it requires a constitutional amendment. I believe that the Electoral College is in the Constitution.
And
what's interesting
who would
is,
initiate that?
Well, that could be initiated any one of a variety of ways. As you know, the ERA has been around for 40 years, and that was initiated through, kind of grassroots, bottom up. The net effect is, though, that Congress usually proposes a constitutional amendment, and I think it requires a 2/3 vote to propose it, and then 3/4 of the state legislatures, which means 37 of the 50 states, have to vote to approve it. What's interesting is that the ERA is still hanging around, and you have state legislatures like California that passed it 36 years ago. And apparently, I guess, the state is still bound by the legislature's passage of it 36 years ago. I don't think that California has any particular interest in bringing it up again and maybe voting it down. But, there may be states out there that were opposed to it 30 years ago that no longer are. And
right.
So it makes it kind of an interesting process all the way around. It's not likely to happen in our lifetimes, and if it did happen, what I would personally like to see is I would like to see the Electoral College, if we decide to do something with it, what I would really like to see is to have the Electoral College maybe stripped of senators. So instead of 538 votes, we would have 438 votes. And that might more closely align to the popular vote without necessarily just going to the popular vote. So instead of 58 electors, California would have 56, but instead of 3 electors, Wyoming would have 1.
Okay. And again, that would coincide with the popular vote because of the so few.
Well, it would to an extent, but if California votes 90% for candidate A, they get 100%. He gets 100% of their electoral votes. If it votes 51% for candidate A, he still gets 100% of their electoral votes. So it would not necessarily be a linear 1-to-1 relationship. It would be more similar than it is currently, and I have not gone back and looked at the Electoral College to see what the results might have been in the 2016 election with this, because frankly, I just kind of spitballed it while we're talking. But it would be interesting to look at whether or not that would have made a difference in the outcome. I have no problem with 2 houses of Congress. I have no problem with every state having the same representation in one of those houses. I do kind of have a little problem with it, but not a huge problem with it. But I I have a major problem with the Electoral College doing the same thing. That essentially gives Wyoming one electoral vote for every roughly 100,000 people in their state, 150,000 people in their state who are of voting age. And it gives California roughly one electoral vote for every 500,000 people of voting age. So by nature, it inherently disenfranchises people in larger states because of each of them only getting 2 electors for the Senate.
Okay. You know the difference between Trump, as I'm sitting here thinking, the difference between Trump's mentality and my buddies at the bar with 3 drinks in them, my buddies at the bar would have respected McCain's legacy.
Well, you know, even
though they wouldn't say Trump, that they wouldn't say this is the deal killer for me, but I don't know anyone, period, who is not shaking their head in sadness that we lost this man. And I haven't even heard of anyone in the world that isn't, or in the country that isn't, except Trump. And that's sad. Let's just put it that way. He was what he was, McCain. He wasn't a perfect man.
He was the first to tell you. Well, as he was John McCain was the first to tell you, if you try to extol his virtues in public, and don't forget, I crashed 2 airplanes.
Yeah, he was. In other words, he was a human being, but he was also, by definition, a hero. If you wanted to take someone who didn't give it up, he could have come home from his prisoner of war thing early because his father was an admiral. He didn't take them up on that. I mean, but just Trump's reaction to him is just as a human is really to me it's very disheartening.
Well, it seems petty. It seems inappropriate, and the reaction undermines any level of moral authority that might have existed on a number of issues. The president has been belittling people in the NFL for 2 seasons now for kneeling during the national anthem, for, quote, failing to respect the flag, unquote.
That's not why they kneel, for crying out loud. Everybody and his dog knows that at this point.
Ralph, allow me to finish the point.
Sorry.
So the premise is that we are disrespecting the flag by not standing for the national anthem. Now, first of all, the flag code doesn't necessarily call for you standing for the national anthem. It simply states that you shouldn't stand for any other country's national anthem or any other country's flag. But beyond that, here's the real issue. John McCain died on Saturday night. And the flag code states that the flags shall be, on the death of a member of Congress, the flag shall be lowered to half-staff until sundown on the day that follows the death. Okay? And the White House itself adhered exactly to that. Actually, at midnight on Sunday night, they had the flag raised back to full staff. There's an iconic long-range photograph that shows the White House flag at full staff and all the flags in the flag court that surrounds the Washington Monument at half staff. And then you read to the end of the flag code, the end of the paragraph on this, and it says that the flag on the White House shall, as in by law is required to, shall remain at half staff until the burial is finished. So in that fit of petulance, they actually broke the law and disrespected the flag in ways far more significant than those they accuse others of doing. This is how you cede the high moral ground. This is how you just give it up.
Wow. Absolutely. That's a great analogy. Petulance, the word you used. He's like a little boy. If he doesn't get his way, but how will that carry over? Again, I harken back to my big fear. He's got his finger on the button. And I'll ask you this. Are the walls closing in on him as you see it?
Are the walls closing in? Yes. Will it matter? No. I think he's going to survive it. I don't think that you're going to see enough Republicans vote to impeach or vote to convict if they do impeach.
Will that be necessary if the Democrats get the House and the Senate back? At least the House.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that the Democrats will get the House and the Senate back. The Senate is a much tougher row to hoe than the House. You know, you've got senators like Heidi Heitkamp who are, literally they're almost like unicorns. Democratic senators from states like South Dakota are few and far between.
Okay.
Or North
Let's
Dakota.
Let's talk a little baseball.
North Dakota.
Let's
baseball. There's a subject I know.
Yeah. Oh, God. You know a lot of things, my friend. You put things into proportion, and I didn't like hearing all of it. My gut feeling is that you think he will survive. I don't mean.
Well, I'll be more honest than that. I fear he will survive.
Oh, okay. You feel okay. Good. Good and bad. Let's put it that way. But then again, that could be good because it's always been my contention that Pence has the potential of screwing us up more than Trump.
Well, if I were Pete Rose,
that's another show, perhaps.
Yeah. If I were Pete Rose, I would put my money on the following scenario. He survives. He runs in 2020 and loses. And then in late November or early December of 2020, he resigns so that Pence is president for a month and pardons him.
Oh, wow. And do you think Pence would be reelected if he, like Jerry Ford, pardoned Nixon?
No. You didn't listen to what I said. He runs in 2020 and loses. And then before he has to leave office, he resigns so that Pence can accede to the throne for a few weeks and pardon him. Pence has no political capital left to spend at this point because he's leaving too.
Yeah, but he might want to run.
Well, if he does, he can't run until 2024. The election will be over already.
That's a good scenario. I like that. I also like
I see that
scenario.
coming.
Pardon me?
But that's not going to protect him from the state of New York.
Right. Pardons don't go to state courts. They only go to federal courts.
The federal government can only pardon you for federal crimes. It would have to be the governor of New York to pardon you for New York state crimes. And I just don't see that
almost
happening.
itching to do that, I'll bet.
Yeah, I don't see that happening in 2020.
No. So, is there a possibility then, remote, that we could see the man be shackled, house arrest, designer toe tag? I'd like that. But before the designer a designer ankle bracelet for the man. He could sit up in Trump Tower and serve his term. They're not going to ever send a former president to jail. But he needs some disgracing.
Well, I don't know. We're in uncharted territory here, Ralph. I mean, what has happened in other countries is that the leader abdicates and flees to a friendly country and seeks asylum.
Yeah. Well, we've become a third world nation, so might as well go for that. Where do you think he'd go where he'd be welcome?
Yeah, I don't think we've become a third world nation. I think we've started to act like one, which is very different.
Okay. Yeah, but it's very different. But if you're in a profession, for instance, say you're an attorney, pretty soon you start acting like all the other attorneys, and pretty soon it's not acting. You know what I mean?
Well, I do know what you mean, but when I think of third world countries, I think of countries that have I think of countries that are unable to maintain sufficient governmental institutions to reliably govern, if you will, the provinces. And I think we are a long, long ways from North Dakota being a land of dirt roads that we can't navigate in order to get medication out there for meningitis epidemic, so we have to try and fly it in with drones like they do in equatorial Africa.
Well,
we're a long way from being
how do we treat Puerto Rico?
How do we treat Puerto Rico?
Right. They still haven't. They're a province. We have American citizens over there. We treat them like a third world country would.
But Ralph, they're an island surrounded by ocean. I don't think many people realize that. They're completely surrounded by water. Did you know that? That makes it very hard to help them.
Okay. It shouldn't take a year to get electricity back.
Said the president a year ago.
Right. A year ago. All right, and an example of a third world country would be one that has these elections that are what do they call them? Paper elections. There's some expression that escapes my little mind right now, but if a country's electoral process is questioned, public government, that sort of stuff, that scares you. That's fundamental. And when I say closing in, if they can prove collusion to fix the election, they can make it treason. And as far as I know, if they get him for free treason, all of his cabinet goes, including Pence. Am I correct on that?
I don't know, because we haven't done that before. The last major public official convicted of treason was Benedict Arnold.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in uncharted territory. It's good theater. You got to say that. It's compelling, but it's crazy-making at the same time. So.
Yeah, well, so are the Western Division races this year.
Absolutely, and we talked. You put something in my head because I haven't been following. Last 3 days, as I mentioned to you off the air, I've been glued to CNN, and I really have lost track of the fact that the Gigantes are in a position where I think you mentioned if they win tonight, they're 5 games out. Is that it? And
well, if they win tonight, they'll be 5 games back of Arizona. Arizona and Colorado are currently tied. But I don't consider that a major issue because it's important for them to beat Arizona because this is the last game they play against them this year. They still have several games left against Colorado and Los Angeles. So they still control their own fate to a certain extent. And what's, I'm sure, impossible for most people to remember is that 8 years ago on this date, the Giants were somewhere around 8 or 9 games out of first place. And they wound up winning a World Series that year.
Whoa. Good. And that was their first World Series, am I correct?
That was their first, yes. And it is absolutely true that someone will win the National League West and that someone will be the team that gets hot between now and the 1st of October.
Now, I want you to speak to Rodriguez, who to me is an absolute spark of light in the 2018 season for the Giants. And then you can talk about anything you want, but is he terrific or what?
Well, I'm going to approach that subject in a slightly roundabout way. When people think of scouting, they think of guys out beating the hustings, going to high school games in Dinuba and, trying to project 16-year-olds 10 years down the road and decide whether to draft them. And that's certainly an important part of scouting. But a more important part of scouting is figuring out who has talent that their organization has failed to develop. And there is no team in baseball that's doing a better job of that right now than the Giants. They are signing 6-year minor league veterans and turning them into major league players. Alan Hansen, Derek Rodriguez. They're very, very good at going out and seeing guys who are terming out in their own organizations, and for whatever reason, maybe they're blocked, maybe they had injuries, maybe they just, fell out of favor because a shiny or newer toy came along and got the developmental interest. But, I've said this all year long. For me, the tweet of the year is Henry Schulman asking Twins fans back in June if they've decided what street in Minneapolis the World Series parade will be hosted on. Because, as he said, if y'all have 23 pitchers in your organization better than Derek Rodriguez, you're unbeatable. because he was in the Twins organization, and the Giants signed him because he was not protected on the 40-man roster and had put in his 6 years.
Well, it was nice seeing his family the other day when he pitched. His dad and his mom sitting there cheering for him with uncles and aunts. He's become a symbol, to me, a symbol of them sticking in there this year. Because without him, wow.
Well, here's a secret that many people don't realize. Since the 1st of June, the San Francisco Giants pitching staff has the lowest ERA in baseball.
Ooh.
3.32 since the 1st of June. And who joined them in early June? Well, Derek Rodriguez and Madison Bumgarner.
Remember we talked early on if they could just keep it together until they get Madison Bumgarner back. And he seems to be improving little by little. He's becoming the old Madison Bumgarner. It's almost like when he came back, he had to start off, it was like going through spring training again. And
well, it was. And the other thing is, he's 30 and he's having to adjust to the fact that he can't just throw high fastballs past people anymore. And if you watched his performance last night, he pitched himself in and out of trouble constantly, but he relied very heavily on his slider, much more than on his fastball, and it used to be the other way around.
Right. Now, that brings me to a question of interest. How's his contract situation at this point?
I'm not positive, but I believe he's under contract through next year, and they will probably look to extend him in the off season.
Now that's my question. Should a pitcher be offered a not just Bumgarner, I'm just talking in general, in baseball, should teams does it make good financial sense to offer long-term contracts to a pitcher who's over 30?
Depends on the pitcher. And by that I specifically mean depends on whether he's had serious mechanical flaws that have led to injuries. If you've got elbows and shoulders involved, probably doesn't. If you've got, but let me ask you this. If you've got a dominant pitcher who's 30 years old and who has missed half of the last 2 seasons with back trouble, do you re-sign him?
I wouldn't. Anything to do with the back, I would shy away from.
So you'd walk away from Clayton Kershaw? Because that's who I'm describing.
Yeah.
Okay, which illustrates my point. It depends on the pitcher.
Depends on the pitcher, of course. Boy, I'd hate to be the one making the decisions and having it fall down, which leads to another question, specifically the Giants. The role of Brian Sabean has changed in the last year or so.
Actually, about 3 years.
Pardon?
It's been about 3 years.
Okay.
Bobby Evans has been the general manager for about 3 years now.
But didn't he assume a larger role this year?
We don't know.
This year?
We don't know. There's speculation that he has stepped back in a little bit. But he's not going to say that, and Bobby's not going to say that. So, anything I would say is pure speculation.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, we talked a couple of weeks ago about Brandon Crawford potentially, or, in the running for maybe being the all-time greatest defensive shortstops going. I've been watching him. He is great.
Do you see that play he made on Paul Goldschmidt 2 nights ago?
I didn't. Like I say,
you should be able to find it on MLB.com. I'm sure that highlight's still up there. He literally, went into the hole on the grass, went to his knees, and when he got up, or maybe he didn't go to his knees, he may have just gone to his backhand, but he did not have time to set his feet and step and throw, and he intentionally skipped the throw in order to get there in time and beat a pretty fast runner on a play that, I'll tell you, had the Arizona broadcast crew shaking its head. I've been working doing stats with their broadcast for this series, and they love to talk about their guy Nick Ahmed and how they think he's the best shortstop in the game, and he's got better offensive numbers than Crawford, and blah blah blah. But then they see plays like that, and they kind of shake their head and go, "Wow, he is awfully good." As I told you when we discussed him earlier, respected baseball person with 30 years in press boxes, or 30 years watching players, I should say, said to me that he's never seen another player take away more base hits than Brandon Crawford does.
That's pretty paying some pretty nice homage to the man.
Well, yeah, because 30 years does cover Omar Vizquel and Ozzie Smith and Cal Ripken, who are three of probably the...
And Vizquel as a defensive shortstop was absolutely... Oh, those hands. Oh, my God.
Vizquel was the best I've ever seen. Vizquel was literally the best I've ever seen, and because he did it for, 21 years, I would still put him, a hair's breadth above Crawford at this point, just because he continued to do it for so long.
And he wasn't really exactly in his prime when he played with the Giants.
Oh, no.
So I could imagine what he must have been back in the day, as it were.
Absolutely. I mean, by the time he got to the Giants, he was relying on knowledge of the hitters and positioning more than on his raw skill set. And yet, remember, that was the first time he played in the National League.
Oh, that's
somehow
a good point.
He seemed to know the players the first time he saw them.
Yeah, I wonder if that isn't like Willie used to watch the pitch as opposed to or know what pitch was going to be thrown. And
right, Willie had the second baseman relay the signals to him.
Okay. So that he could, that first step, or at least in his mind, he'd be more apt to go that way. Every time the name is brought up, I just shake my head when I think of the so many ways that Willie Mays could beat you. On the bases, his arm, positioning other players. Far and away the best ball player that ever lived. That's Babe Ruth notwithstanding.
Yeah, I would have to say that...
Billy can solo, too, by the way.
The thing that I would say about Willie is that his baseball IQ is probably unmeasurably high. He instinctively knew more about the game and what was going to happen than most people who've studied it for 50 years.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what kind of player Kitty Cat was, because Willie said everything he knew he learned from his dad.
Wow. Very good point. We talked once, and I don't know if you read the book Willie's Time by Einstein.
Charlie Einstein. Of course I did, but it's a long time since.
It's worth rereading every now and again. It's like Ball 4 or Vec is in Rec, or one of the real classics. Or how about your book? Tell me about your book a little bit. The book you co-wrote?
Well, it's not one of the classics, I'm sure of that.
Well, actually, I'm sure it is, because we talked about how the fact that it's almost becoming a textbook at this point. So, modesty, no modesty on podcast radio. Talk about it a little bit. Talk about the writing process, and because we don't often enough.
Well, the book came onto the market in March of 2010. The idea for the book came into my brain in 2001. That's the gestation period was 9 years. That involved thinking about the idea for a while and then deciding that it would be interesting to try and write the book, and then talking to someone who was working on what turned out to be an unpublished biography of Willie Mays, a Pulitzer Prize winner, who hooked me up with his agent, who took us on, who spent a full year making us write and rewrite the book proposal, which is basically like a business strategy document.
Right.
When she finally was happy with it, she took it out and got us 2 offers within 3 days, one of which was twice as good as the other. Guess which one we took?
I think you took the one that was twice as good as the other.
Yes, we did.
Just a guess.
And
smart enough to write a book, smart enough to read the figures. That's how I look at it.
Well, yeah. Let's put it this way: I paid just enough attention in math classes to know that 50 is bigger than 25.
Nice. I want to know how you celebrated when you signed it all and you knew it was going to happen. I want to know, was it champagne?
It was I shared with my co-author. First of all, I went out for the occasion and I purchased a vintage Parker fountain pen to sign the contract.
Wow. Parker in its day was classy. It was like cross pens.
I mean, I have fountain pens. I have Mont Blancs, but I purchased a fountain pen for signing the contract, and then we purchased together and shared a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue.
Nice.
And for those who don't know,
you're a Renaissance man, Michael Duca. You've experienced things, and
I'm old enough to have lived through the Renaissance. That's true.
I'll tell you what. You've got the dream life. If you're not keeping stats, you're being an official scorer. You're living at the ballpark. How about that? It's like a sandbox. It's a play thing. And you don't have to, by living at the ballpark, you don't have to sit for 3 days and watch CNN like I did for the last 3 days. So
this is absolutely true. I will finish for you very quickly so that we don't ever have to go back to it again. So after celebrating signing the contract, we then spent the next 2 years or so interviewing about 200 people. For the book proposal, we interviewed one person, Blackjack McDowell, former Stanford pitcher, who was in the locker room for the team meeting that spurred Robin Ventura to go out and take on 41-year-old Nolan Ryan on the mound in the most famous baseball fight of them all. And our sample chapter actually tells the entire 2-year-long story of that fight. And that's what sold the book, was the fact that we demonstrated that we had access to people and we had the trust of people that they would tell us inside stuff and let us write it, and they trusted us to write it. And that's pretty much how things turned out. You know, we did over 200 interviews, most of them in person, some of them by phone. We're fortunate enough to live in an area that has both American and National League teams, so every team and every
And you
coaching
had access
staff
to the
came
press
through.
box as well.
Well, the press box, but more importantly, we had access to the coach's office and the manager's office and the clubhouse so that we could go down and talk to players and retired players, which is what coaches are, and managers, general managers. I talked to umpires. We ran the gamut. If you look carefully at the back of the book, I think it is, I list I think it's 197 people that we interviewed.
Wow.
The one guy that we tried to get that we could never even penetrate the secretary. And I tried every way I could think of, people who knew him, former teammates, PR staff when he was the president of the team, was Nolan Ryan. Never got to Nolan Ryan.
Wow. That's too bad. That is too bad. But, I was talking to Peter Golenbach, and he still, all these years later, when he did his book, Dynasty, he never got to speak to Joe DiMaggio. And in a way, that was a disappointment to him. But he spoke to the players that knew him, and that helped.
Yeah, I know someone who knew Joe very well. Teammates, spent most of 1941 at Hickam Field in Hawaii with Joe at the hospital. They were both in the Army and playing baseball and injured, and that's Charlie Silvera.
I had an interview with Charlie. I did an interview. Oh, man. I didn't know they were together back then. He didn't talk about his wartime experiences. He was.
Oh, I've been to Charlie's house. I've held Joe D's 1940 uniform, flannel, with the name DiMaggio sewn into the waistband and into the collar of the jersey. Charlie had one of the greatest memorabilia collections you can imagine. I mean, he had all-star bats from Yogi and Ted Williams and Jimmy Fox and Stan Musial, and holding Teddy Ballgame's baseball bat was like a religious experience, Ralph. I mean, I can't even begin to explain it to you, because I'm sure it was just me, and I'm sure it was purely psychological, but when I picked up that bat, it began to tingle.
Well, for me, it would be touching the flannel on Joe DiMaggio's 1941 jersey, was it?
1940.
40. Oh, my God.
And how about slipping on the glove that warmed up Don Larson?
Oh, he had Yogi's glove.
No.
Oh, no, he had his own glove.
He warmed up Larson.
Yeah, because I was thinking Yogi jumping into his arms at the end. He warmed him up. Wow.
Oh, no. Charlie had nothing from Yogi. Nothing at all, except he had two things. In his house, he has a little wet bar, and the wet bar is wallpapered with pink paper with baseballs on it, which was leftover from Yogi's basement. Okay? And if you came to Charlie's house and saw his memorabilia collection, you had to sign a baseball. And there were no unsigned ones left when I went, so I had to, like many people, I had to share a baseball, and I'm sharing it with Billy Martin.
Whoa. And you speak of gloves. When I was a kid, I had a Billy Martin glove. And let me tell you a quick, it goes off how baseball stories. I broke the ring finger of my left hand. I throw righty. And I'm unable, I never got it set properly, I'm unable to get my glove on my right hand. So I said to myself, you know what? I can still throw. It's just my ring finger. I could throw lefty, just can't get a glove on. I'm going to learn to throw lefty. I went out, and there's a store in Alameda, the old Silver store. You remember that? I'm sure the Silver Baron. Well, he had a bunch of gloves, old vintage gloves, and one of which I bought, a left-handed glove. I'm learning to throw left-handed. But here's the kicker to the story. The glove was a 1950 Wilson A something, or top-of-the-line glove, but it's a Billy Martin signed glove. It's a lefty glove, but it's a Billy Martin signature on it. So the glove I had as a kid was a Billy Martin glove. I've got a Billy Martin glove now, and you mentioned putting your hand in a glove, and you mentioned Billy Martin, so I got carried away with my story. Isn't that how baseball is?
Well, there you go. And so I will finish the Charlie story, and we can sign off.
All right.
So Yogi is managing the Mets at the end of his career, and Charlie goes down to see him, and he says, you know, Yogi, I got memorabilia, and does he ever? I mean, you know, we're talking about one of the 5 or 6, I don't remember, people to have ever played on 5 consecutive World Championship teams in any sport.
Right. There were 12 of them, as a matter of fact. Rizzuto wrote a book. People like Woodling and Bauer, and I think Joe Collins was one. But yes, in any sport, what a dynasty! Our last great dynasty is as baseball's last great dynasty that way. The A's are close. The Giants are a dynasty if you look at it. Can you imagine if they come back and win this year?
Barely. Barely, I can imagine. So just to wrap this up, so Charlie says, you know, Yogi, I get stuff from everybody but you. I don't have anything that's been close to you. And Yogi immediately says, well, you can't have Carmen. Now, for those who don't know, Carmen is Yogi's wife.
Yes.
And Carmen and Rose were absolutely the best of friends. So Yogi says, here, I'll give you something that's been close to me. And he takes off his jockstrap and hands it to Charlie. with the number 8 and the word Dara on the waistband. And Charlie has that tucked away in a beer stein on a very high shelf above his fireplace. I know his wife Rose does not listen to this, so I can say this, because Rose thinks that it's gone. Once she found out what it was, she said, get rid of that. I don't want that in my house. But Charlie's kept it for all the years, and when Charlie showed it to me with obvious pride, I said, Charlie, why do you hide it? He said, well, look at it. And I said, yeah, but Charlie, for all these years, you've been missing out on one of the greatest lines in baseball history. For all you guys who said I couldn't carry Yogi's jock.
Oh, great. Absolutely great. Later on today, when I get back to my computer, I am going to send you a link to an interview I did with Charlie back in 1995, I think it was, at Cal State Hayward. And I brought the likes of Leonard Cobbett and Hank Sauer and Charlie and Charlie Fox. Brought them in for interviews, and I'll send you a link to the Charlie interview and see if it brings back some good stuff for you. Because
that would be great.
He's getting up there. I haven't heard of him being out and about?
No, Charlie's not doing well at all. Charlie's not doing well at all. And, that's but it's also perhaps to be expected if you're in your 90s.
Yeah. And, there's something you lose. Yogi was his best friend. You lose your best friend. Whitey lost his best friend. People go downhill after a while. It's that old fable, the last man standing, that kind of stuff. That's the booby prize, because your friends and relatives are all gone.
Right, and Charlie's best friend was actually Jerry Coleman.
Oh, really? Yeah, they played ball in San Francisco together.
That's Jerry and Bobby Brown and Charlie were all born within a 28-day period in September. And all football in San Francisco. They played for the Keneally Yankees. They all were together playing a game at Washington Park in Alameda when Pearl Harbor occurred.
Whoa! I live 2.5 long blocks from Washington Park, and I walk that park. That's where I'm learning to play lefty, to pitch lefty, or to throw lefty. Not to pitch lefty. I'm going to be a pitcher. I'm 71 years old. But I can now throw as if I could have a catch, which, and it's at Washington Park. Those guys played at the Sunday morning of Pearl Harbor at Washington Park.
Yep.
Bobby Brown.
They did.
Bobby Brown, who?
Jerry
Charlie
Coleman.
And Jerry
and
Coleman.
Charlie Silver. Yeah. And each of those
I'll never
the other two guys.
I will never forget that.
And each of those other two guys will tell you that Charlie was the best player of the three of them. But Charlie had the bad fortune of being behind Yogi.
High praise for him, indeed, because those guys all three were terrific. But wow, I have some goosebumps because I walk on that field every day. Literally, I go down and I'll sit in the stands. Wow, Pearl Harbor Day, Jerry Coleman, Charlie Silvera, and who? Do I have you?
You have me.
I lost you.
I'm here.
No,
I'm here.
Who's the third one? Who's the third one?
Jerry, Charlie, and Bobby Brown.
And Bobby Brown, another person who was nice enough to be interviewed on this network. So, wow, great talking history, great talking life with you, Michael.
Well, I'll do it again soon, Lord willing, and creek don't rise.
Absolutely. And if Arthur Godfrey doesn't come back, it wouldn't be all that bad. Didn't he used to say that to end his programs in the morning?
I don't know. All I remember is that he celebrated our 50th state even before it was the state. He always opened his program by saying, Hawaii, Hawaii, Hawaii.
Yeah, so with the ukulele, Hawaii, Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good memories, good fun. Thank you, Michael.
All right, talk to you soon, Ralph. Take care.
Talk to you. Thanks for listening, everybody. If it's as much fun for you as it is for me, you had a great morning. Thanks again.